yourself as we carry forward. Now, a couple logistics as we get started here. We're using Blab for this. If you're not familiar, welcome aboard. It's a new format that gives you the ability to, well, like you're seeing right now, on screen. We're here. You'll see that Gina is there and the lovely Dan Johnson joining us down there. Hi, Dan. Introduce Dan in just a moment, and you'll see we have space for you to come on board a little bit later also. So if you have questions, by all means, come on and join us. Those of you joining us by recording, you missed it, okay? Sorry. But if you're going to be here live, we can get you on board. And also, you'll notice over on the right side, again, those of you that are live, you'll see that we have a live chat. So you can put your questions in there. If you have questions for any of us on screen, we'll be able to help you and want to hear from you. So in other words, this is really interactive. We also are recording this, obviously, so we'll have it available for those of you who are interested in it. We'll be able to join us for that. But the introduction here, really wrote it up here just like grown-ups do it. Got the introduction and everything here. And I love this quote. This is from their website. Listen to this. He says, "I support a tax revolution because no one should IRS if they've done nothing wrong." Wow, isn't that amazing? We even have to say that. That's the reality of our world today, and what they're doing at his organization is amazing. Dan started his first activist organization out of his dorm room at age 18. For the next 2.5 years, he grew PANDA, that's People Against the NDAA. If you haven't seen what the NDAA is, Google it. It's something you need to know about. And it's a large movement resisting a federal law and the local level in the United States. He wrote over a dozen news sources, including Huffington Post, Policy Mike, Occupy.com, Western Journalism, The Fifth Column, and others. He's been a featured at over 100 events, appeared on numerous radio and TV shows, and serves as president of the board of Solutions Institute and Activist Training Center. As executive director of the Tax Revolution Institute, I love that name, Tax Revolution. Just cool by itself. He is dedicated to exposing incompetence and corruption at the Internal Revenue Service. And so with great honor and pride, Dan, welcome aboard. Glad to have you here at Freedom Fest TV.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about the Tax Revolution Institute and what you do, the background, anything that I might have left out in some of the gaps. Want to hear you.
So you mentioned some of my background. I got involved in activism when I was 18. I saw a YouTube video, essentially, on the National Authorization Act. And from there, decided that even though I'm a college kid, I'll go to my local city council and we'll get council because, you know, every one of the public officials in the United States takes into the Constitution, regardless of whether they're local, state, federal, doesn't matter. Take an oath to the United States Constitution. And I figured, okay, well, since local officials take an oath to that Constitution and the NDAA violates no fewer than 14 of it, then we can probably get the local officials to say, look, that'll never happen here. For those of you who aren't familiar with the NDAA, short, if you are familiar with the Japanese American detention in 1942, where 110,000 Americans were detained without charge or trial, the NDAA is exactly the same authority passed in 2011. And we figure, okay, well, we need to get the city council to basically say, no, this won't happen. We'll never allow this in our city. Very simple. You know, it probably never happen anyway, so say it won't happen. So I brought Occupy Bowling Green Young Republicans and the Bowling Green Young Americans for Liberty. So we had Libertarians, Democrats, Republicans there. Bowling Green, Ohio, actually.
Ohio, okay.
The other Bowling Green nobody knows about. And so in the dying state that nobody cares about, except for during political season. But anyway, so we brought about maybe 40 people there to the city council meeting. Packed. We actually had, for safety, we had some silver reflective duct tape across our vests. We're the silver duct tape brigade because, you know, reflect crossing guards, right? So we show
duct tape, I like it already.
So we show up, how American? We show up at city council. We're like, okay, we want you to pass this resolution basically saying the constitutional rights of people in this city would be protected, due process would be protected, right to trial would be protected.
Yeah, the Constitution, it would seem like you probably had everyone agreeing to it, but jumping up and pumping their fists in the air, agreeing with you, right?
Easy thing. We filled the city council room and people standing outside, all this stuff. And,
right up there, even above apple pie and Chevrolet and all that.
Exactly. Right. So I get an email from the mayor for our first city council visit, and basically says that, and if I can quote it, if I remember right, these students shake government 160. They don't know the inner workings of national government, and it's up to us in some respects to educate them.
Ooh. Can you say patronizing?
Ooh, man. So the city council that we had gotten to resolution sent me an email, said the political winds are no longer in my favor. So I will not be introducing this resolution, and down wholeheartedly and without remorse.
Whoa.
And consider that you think of the Robert Frost moment, right? I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. There's always that one person you can point to. It's like, you are the reason doing this. You are the reason that I achieved so much, because you didn't believe. And that was my mayor, Dick Edwards, in Bowling Green. And I decided at that point, you know what? I could quit. I could go back to college. I could work my way up to the political system, city council, state representatives, Congress, work. Or I could prove him wrong. And being stubborn, I decided to prove him wrong. So
good for you.
That was what really launched me into that sphere and into going nationwide and doing all these organizations. And what I'm really doing right now with the Tax Revolution Institute is there's one agency that strikes fear into everyone's hearts the minute they hear, that's the IRS. And as evidence of this, there was an article in the Las Vegas Review-Journal not too long ago that was about scams and about the IRS scam. And one of the things the author noted, is Bloomberg writer, one of the things the author noted was that the IRS scam is unlike any. See, with other scams, they offer you something. Kenyan Prince has $1 billion in the account that he's just dying to give you access to, or you can get a boat for free or an apartment for free. Or they give you something. They play off of greed.
Yeah, but
the IRS scam is very different. They say, we've determined you've been assessed $800.
Dan, can you hear me? If you can hear us, he'll probably refresh in a second. He's gone out on him right now. So just telling us all about the nasty IRS.
Okay. So going back to that, right. So going back to that, really, when it comes to the IRS scam, though, they play off your fear. And how are they able to play off of your fear? They're able to play off your fear because people who know they've done nothing wrong still fear the IRS. See, that, to me, that encapsulates the America's attitude toward this agency. That it goes outside the law, that it doesn't respect the law, that it doesn't care about rights and people's liberties, that it has gone so far beyond being a tax collector. In fact, we were at IRS Forum like a couple months ago, and they were saying, well, we really should change the mission of the IRS. It shouldn't be to collect revenue. It should be to collect revenue and distribute benefits. They're a benefit administrator as much as they're a revenue collector. So Congress continues to place more areas where the IRS is given responsibility. The Affordable Care Act is a great example of something the IRS never should have been given responsibility over. And so this agency, and the reason they do that is clear. People fear this agency. That's the reason they do that, is because they know they can get compliance with a letter from the IRS versus a letter from any other agency, because believe that no matter whether or not they've done something right, that the IRS will go after them, that the tax code is so complicated, that tax law is so hard to understand, enforcement is so difficult to follow, that really what it comes down to is people who've done nothing, they fear this agency. And that's not right. That is not America. That is not what this works. I don't care whether you're left. I don't care whether you're on the right. They've tried to make this a political issue. I'm going to get on this one. Media tried to make the targeting scandal in 2013 a political issue. That, it's the IRS, it's their groups. Look, presidents have been using the IRS to target people politically for decades, going back to Kennedy. And when we think about agency. We're in the dark. How many people have been abused by the IRS? We have no idea. How many people have had their assets unfairly? We have no idea. You have a special court you go in that the IRS basically controls. Fight the IRS. You're guilty until proven innocent. This is, to me, part of you could say corruption, other things, but it's really the heart of what's wrong in our government today. Is a unaccountable agency that just as recently as a couple years ago was described by an official document as a rogue agency. And what it comes down to is, if we are going to have any type of tax reform in this country, if we are going to have any type of respect for liberties and rights in this country, then we have to make the IRS transparent. We have to make the IRS accountable. We have to hold that agency's feet to the fire. We have to show people that there is a better way, that if we come together, that if we work together, we can eliminate the fear people have of the IRS.
Yeah.
It seems like most
people, left and right, would say, yes, okay, if we're in a society, many people feel we can have some form of taxation and we want it to be reasonable, it should be simple, it should be easily understood. It's gone a whole lot farther than just collecting revenue, as you said, and then give benefits. And I know that you have been involved, and you and the TRI have been involved in what's called the Congressional Oversight Project. You got something where you're looking at not IRS, but also at Congress people as well. Tell us a little bit about that and what your involvement is with it.
Well, you think about this logically, right? So the Congressional Oversight Project, or COP, and then if you're staff of the Congressional Oversight Project, but that aside, the Congressional Oversight Project was launched by TRI because if you think about the IRS, you as a citizen can't walk into the IRS building and fire the commissioner. No matter how many citizens you get together with you, if you all marched, if 1 million people today marched down to the IRS building and surrounded it, you wouldn't be able to fire the commissioner. You have no legal authority to do so. But who does? Congress. Congress has the authority to impeach. Congress has the authority to appoint. Congress has the authority to reject appointments. That you think about, let's put this in perspective. The IRS, though they're a fancy catchphrase and stuff like that, the IRS is really the unruly child. And if you have an unruly child in a store or an unruly child in a mall, do you go to the unruly child and plead with this 3 or 4 year old, please stop, crying and screaming and throwing things? No. You go to the parents. You go to the parents and say, hey, please get control of your child. Well, really what it comes down to is, and not everybody in Congress is part of the problem. Some of them just inherited it. This problem's been around for a long time. The IRS is much more of a paper tyranny than it is the physical thug-like, mafia-like raids they used to do in the 80s and 70s. But this problem's been around for a long time. And the problem of our tax code and the problem of an incomprehensible tax system has been around for a long time. So not everyone in Congress is necessarily responsible for bringing it to this point, but they are responsible for fixing it. And so what it comes down to is the Congressional Oversight Project. We have engaged every chair and ranking member of every committee in Congress that deals with tax law or deals with tax enforcement. We have given them information on, like, the IRS Oversight Board, for example, which will be a fun thing we can bring up later. We have given them information on a huge restriction on the First Amendment that's coming up in October. We've given them information on all of these things. So we're basically testing and seeing, are you part of the problem, or are you willing to be part of the solution? And the Congressional Oversight Project focuses on actually fixing the problem. We're not, out there saying, oh, well, let's defeat the IRS, because it's not logical. You can't do that. And also, as much as I appreciate the sentiment, we're not out there saying abolish the IRS. Why? Because you are going to need a revenue agency, whether you call it the IRS or the DNA or America's Revenue Authority or whatever you call it. If the government is going to be funded, you're going to need a revenue agency. But what we are saying is Congress has not only the authority, but the responsibility to rein in this agency and to say to it, you cannot violate the rights of the American people with impunity anymore. They haven't been doing that. And the Congressional Oversight Project is reporting on that. We're talking about, the recommendations that Congress made, all the big hearings of the IRS scandal in 2013, the recommendations Congress made, not many of them have been followed yet. So where are those recommendations? Where are the recommendations from reforms in the 80s? Where are the recommendations? So scoring those. So looking at what Congress is doing and focusing on the parents instead of just the unruly child. That's what the Congressional Oversight Project does. We film hearings. So we go in and we actually film the hearings. We go in and
we're talking with Dan
sit down
Johnson.
with congressmen
He's
and
with the
their
Tax
staffers, et cetera, et
Revolution
cetera. That's
Institute
Congressional
here
Oversight.
on Freedom Fest TV. And Dan is going to be one of the speakers joining us for our annual event in Las Vegas, Freedom Fest, which will be coming up in July. We encourage you to get on board and come hear him, because not only will you hear him talk about these kind of things, but even more then. And right now he's been telling us about what is going on and how they're involved with it. And matter of fact, one of the things I wanted to ask you while we got you here, Dan, is I understand that an important date is coming up on October 1st, 2016. As we're recording this now, we're not there yet. Those of you watching this on recording, well, you might be seeing it afterwards. Dan, what is happening on October 1st, 2016, particularly as it relates to the IRS and the American people?
So in order to understand this, I want to step back for a second. The targeting scandal in 2013, shortly afterward, the IRS fired 5 of its top officials. They wrote an internal document and they started talking about how to fix this. And the solution they came up with was, well, we never really violated the law. We actually just interpreted it differently. And as a federal agency, we have the authority to interpret regulations differently. So they issued in 2013 what they called a clarification. I would call it making law, but what they called a clarification, which basically says that 501c4s and which are advocacy groups, there's about 86,000 of them or so. 501c4s, where most citizens who want to get involved in the public policy process, they will form a 501c4. Why? Liability. For the same reason any businessman will form a corporation. Liability, they want liability to be on the corporation. It's protection necessary for you to do this. It also makes donations not tax deductible for the person donating, but for you. So most citizens, this is a citizen area. 501c4s is a citizen area. Most citizens get involved through here. So the IRS is basically saying that if you are a 501c4 and we want to apply it to C3s, which are charities, which are educational institutions, which are churches, which are, go down the line, all your favorite dog and cat loving charities. And Koshkin recently said they want to apply it to 5, 6s, and 7s, which are chambers of commerce, unions, and basically every other nonprofit under the sun. Really, the reason that citizens, or the reason that the IRS is going after C4s is in this rule, they say, if you are a 501c4, and we'd love to apply it to everybody else, so tell us how. But if you're a 501c4, you cannot mention the name of a candidate.
The name of a candidate.
In
that seems
90
to fly in the
days
face of a thing I heard of called the First Amendment.
Primary. Correct.
Yeah, did they repeal that one?
I heard of it once. Are you sure it's still there? You can't mention the name of a candidate. You can't mention the name of a political party. You can't really engage at all in the political process within 30 days of a primary or 60 days of an election. And this includes federal candidates, state candidates, local candidates. This includes inter-party candidates who don't announce themselves. This includes if you post about, if let's say a nonprofit gives somebody an award for saving the kittens, and that person runs for office 2 years later, well, the IRS and Treasury intend that because you had their name on your website 2 years earlier and it's still there while they're running for office, you'll lose your nonprofit status. So not only is this a direct stifling of, you can't talk about how a politician votes, period. You would not be able to, as a nonprofit, starting with C4s, talk about how a politician votes. Well, where do most people find out how their politicians vote? They don't go to thomas.gov and try to work out the database. An advocacy group tells them, hey, your politician voted against this gun legislation, or your politician did this, or your politician did that. That really what it comes down to is the IRS is even restricting people from registering, nonprofits from registering people to vote or holding voter registration drives. So what it does is it cuts the knees off citizen engagement. It cuts the knees off citizen activism inside and within the government. And it re-levels the playing field. So now the super PACs and the corporations and the special interests and the lobbyists, they all now have the playing field because everybody else is silenced. Everybody else is censored, essentially, from talking about this. And this is great for the IRS because they can say, well, we never did anything wrong in the targeting scandal. We just reinterpreted the law. All that stuff was good. Those questions were important. We need to ask those questions. And really what it comes down to is people will be left less informed. People will not know how their politicians vote. And this, you could call it an Incumbent Protection Act. You can call it whatever you want. The IRS issued these rules in 2013. Well, Congress defunded them last year until October 1st of this year. And the IRS commissioner has said this is their top priority. One of their top priorities this year is to get these rules passed. So basically by October 1st, if Congress does not act, the IRS will effectively silence 86,000
people in each of those organizations
of citizens. 86. Some of them have 5 members, some of them have 500,000. But those people will not be able to talk about how
like that could be important. Those of us that are voters, we need to make a decision on voting in an election. And we've got person A, candidate B, candidate C, all of whom seem real nice. Their pictures look good with them and their families. They, got a little flag behind them or whatever. The only way that we really know what that person is like and whether they would represent us, which seems like that's why they're running. Because I can't be there in the state and the government for all the things. I need someone there that will represent me, that thinks like I do, would behave and think like I do in a given situation. The only way I find out is by listening to them, asking them questions. What would you do in this hypothetical? What about this hypothetical? What would you do there? And what you're saying is now that process of finding out about them has been curtailed rather severely. Is that right?
It would be curtailed severely October 1st if that doesn't happen, if Congress does not act to prevent it. And even though Congress temporarily acted, you have to think about this from the perspective of a nonprofit attorney. If you're an attorney and you're advising your client as to where the red line is, you're going to advise them to stay as far away from the red line as possible. So the fact that Congress only temporarily suspended it until October 1st, well, if you're an attorney, you're telling your client, hey, I know you might want to report on how this politician votes, but this rule could come up this year, and they could go after you for everything that's on your website. So if you don't engage in that area, you're much safer. So it's already chilling the free speech of people in the political process. And if you think you're a non-political nonprofit, you do nothing in politics at all. You don't even so much as talk about candidates, which is really hard not to do. But you have to constantly police your website and make sure that you don't accidentally mention a candidate. And every time there's a local election, you have to know about it. Every time there's a special election, you have to know about it. Every time there's a state election, every time there's a federal election, you have to know about it. So you have essentially put a huge burden of red tape that the IRS is not going to enforce wholeheartedly. They're going to have selective enforcement. There's no way you can enforce that on 86,000 organizations at once. You're going to selectively
politics would be involved in some of that selective enforcement.
For a while until the IRS doesn't like what you're doing, and then
right, they never have right.
Because the IRS has never been
one of our
they've never
right now joined. I gave us a very important thing here. This could apply to all nonprofits, C3, C4, etc. Is that true, Dan?
They're starting with C4s, and we know how the government works. They open the door once, and then they get into other areas. They're starting with C4s. They asked in the rule how we apply it to C3s, how we apply it to charities, and Congressional has said he wants to apply it to C3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, and 7s. So they've already said this is our foot in the door, and we want to step into this. And you think about, let's say you actually support this general idea that nonprofits shouldn't have, that you shouldn't have any free speech the minute you get together with other people. And become a nonprofit, then why is the IRS regulating election law? Why isn't the FEC, the agency that literally was designed to do this, why isn't the FEC doing this? Why is it the IRS? Why are we taking revenue collectors and having them do what we know they can't do very well, which is determine politics? which is take political stances or determine what someone's political stances are and what they should do about it. We know the IRS is horrible at that. We know that they abuse people and violate people's rights when they do that. So why is the IRS involved? Why not the FEC? If for some reason you actually would support this, why not the FEC? Because people fear the IRS. That's why. That's why they do it. So really what we're doing right now is, as a C3, we can only go so far. But what we're doing right now, or C3 pending, what we're doing right now is we've put together what we call the First Amendment Alliance. Because the First Amendment Alliance, that's correct. So the reason we call it the First Amendment Alliance, right, there's a lot that goes into a name. You think about a lot that goes into a name. The reason we call it the First Amendment Alliance is because if you look at the First Amendment, you see essentially, if you read off the First Amendment, you have freedom of religion in there. Well, this would apply to churches. You have freedom of the press. Well, a lot of press are based out of a nonprofit. A lot of nonprofits report on what politicians do. So you have freedom of the press. That's violated. Freedom of assembly. Non-political nonprofits are assembling together. In fact, the reason that it's not legal for a C3 to lobby, and that's okay under the Constitution, is because C4s can lobby. It's because C4s can affect legislation. That's why the Supreme Court says C3s can't lobby. So you're affecting the freedom of assembly, you're affecting the freedom of religion, you're affecting the freedom of speech, because you can't separate political speech from free speech. It can't be done. It's impossible to separate political speech from free speech. Everything's political.
With the government looking at the bathrooms and who's going to be there, I don't know exactly how that's going to turn out, but we do know the lines will be longer. And that's the one thing you can be guaranteed when the government gets involved. What do you think?
Oh God! Well, if
one thing waiting on the polls, waiting on the bathrooms, that's a whole different.
I would say that's probably the case.
I'm thinking that's outside the Constitution, but we digress.
So long story short, the First Amendment Alliance is really, we're getting all these organizations. We're talking, if you run a nonprofit, you're watching this, you run a nonprofit, you're involved in a nonprofit organization, let that nonprofit organization know about these rules that are coming down. We have information, taxrevolution.us. That's our website, taxrevolution.us. We have information on this Free Speech Alliance rule. And join the Free Speech Alliance. Basically, talk to your members, talk to, as an individual even, talk to your congressman. Say, hey, this is concerning.
Yeah, very important.
And this could curtail free speech in this country. And this could essentially stop us from learning how our politicians vote, which is something that the internet created.
Secretary of State John Kerry, who said that the internet makes it very difficult to govern. And yeah, that's all right. It's I think somehow I'm thinking we can see the founders cheering on that and saying, yes, it is a good thing. Maybe even Alexander Hamilton would cheer a little bit on that. But we see that there's a lot of options that we have, and a lot that's going on we need to be aware of. Dan, you have frozen on the screen there for some reason. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, try a refresh on your computer, and let's see if that clears it up. We want to make sure that we can have you on there. And those of you that are joining us right now, we want to make sure that you have an option to ask some questions. Dan will try to come back here in a moment, and we're going to talk about what's happening with our tax law. As you can see, we've got some technology challenges, but we've got Gina Carr, our engineer and producer, joining us. Gina, what do you think of what Dan has said thus far?
Well, it's very disconcerting, especially what he said about how many 58,000, 85,000 organizations that are going to be effectively shut down if the IRS doesn't get its act together, which is quite likely. So that's very sad. And, his point about you can't disconnect political speech from free speech, and that a tax-exempt organization can't mention a candidate within 90 days of an election. I mean, it's just gone way too far. There's, these regulations, these rules. I'm sure there were very good intentions in the very beginning when these were implemented, at least by some people, but it just don't make any sense. We just can't operate that way.
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on, and we're going to be talking about this and more at Freedom Fest, which is coming up this July. And we still have a few seats, but they're closing rapidly, and we are filling up. We only had limited space on this, and we would like you to be involved. So now is the time to act, to get involved. Dan Johnson's planning to be there with us, along with a host of others. Really, I look forward to it so much because it's really an intellectual feast. It's people getting together, exchanging ideas. You're learning about a variety of topics, not just tax like here, but history and writing, nutrition, health from a free market point of view. People from around the world come together, talk and exchange ideas. Gina, tell us a little bit about Freedom Fest and how people can get involved. And I think you also have a way for them to save some money with a discount coupon on this. Tell us about that.
It's real exciting that yesterday we just announced the schedule for this year. I mean, we've known who the speakers were going to be for quite a while, and there's still more speakers coming on board. There'll be close to probably 300 speakers in total at Freedom Fest, because we have a lot of panels, we have special debates, we have people who are main stage speakers, people who are breakout speakers. And so we just launched the actual schedule yesterday, and so it's on an app and it's on the website at freedomfest.com. And we've put together, exactly who's going to be speaking at what time, at least what we know right now. So yes, you can get more information at freedomfest.com. And if you use the code FFTV, all caps, when you are registering.
And spell that out for us.
Spell out FFTV.
Yeah, FFF as in freedom, and then F as in fest, right? Because sometimes the F can sound like an S, and we don't want them typing in that. We want them to get the right thing.
Freedom Fest TV, initials FFTV, is the code to get $100 off at freedomfest.com. Or when you go to the website, there's also a phone number. You can call and talk to the lovely ladies at registration. They are more than eager to help you out and to help you arrange those special tickets for the really closed exclusive events, special up close and personal events with Senator Rand Paul, George Foreman, Don King, Dinesh D'Souza, Steve Forbes, all kinds of wonderful special events that you just won't be able to get into. And just a final word before I turn it back, let me tell you guys, there are incredible deals on airfares right now. And some people are saying it's only $99 to get to Vegas. So check it out. It's a good time to reserve that. But I'll come back at the end and tell you some more. Right now, let's turn it back over. Dan, glad you could get back with us here.
Yeah, well, thank you, Gina. And Dan, welcome back aboard. I see on the notes here your computer crashed.
Well, what you see what it really was. It was a planned commercial break to allow Gina to come in and pitch Freedom Fest. See?
Are you sure it wasn't the IRS hacking us?
Well, considering how good they are at protecting their information, I'm not sure they're terribly good at hacking. But
yeah, that could be.
All right.
Could be. Well, we're glad you made it back in. Gina, thank you very much for your help there. And Dan, we're glad you're joining us. And by the way, as we get started, a technical note here. Dan, do you notice what mine looks like right now? If I move my laptop this way, you might want to consider moving yours up just a bit so we can see your eyes.
Oh.
Right now, we're chopping off your eyes. There you go. A little bit higher so it doesn't chop off your head right there. And it's like right now, it's kind of like chopping off your head this way. You see what's happening there? If you have a way, you can move that up a little bit more. That might be even better. I mean, try that here. I'm playing technical engineer here. There we go. Yeah, something like that. What kind of computer are you using, by the way?
Using a Windows. I've always been a Windows guy.
Windows, not a real computer like the Mac, right? Oh,
burn.
You have to, I got to put those zigs in every now and then. It's like they say, once you go Mac, you never go back.
Well,
so
you can't go back because you have to pay for all the repairs and you can't repair yourself and you can't. But anyway, I'll
yeah, anyway, we'll leave that for another time. Yeah, but you raised some very good points. Well, you've told us this, and one of the things I've seen in the freedom and liberty movement is we hear about this atrocity from the government and that atrocity, and you're accurate. You're right on that. Now I want to take it into another level, and that level is going to be where we want to find out what we can do. And before we even find out that from you, those of you that are joining us right now, those of you on board, we have used this technology, Blab, when it's working, it's great, so that you can come on board. Yes, you watching this right now live, we would love to have you come on the screen. All you got to do is click on that call in button. You click on that and we'll approve you. Give it a couple clicks here and you can be on the screen to ask Dan a question. And if you've got a comment, we'd love to hear from you on that. So Dan, we've heard all of this that you've talked about, and I'm in full agreement with you. There's a situation going on that is violating a lot of the principles. Many of us feel that it's violating the amendments to the Constitution. What can we do in a practical sense? I like the way that you say, even though you call yourself the Tax Revolution Institute, it's all peaceful, because we know that violence really wouldn't do anything. I mean, it would be against it. So we're abhorrent of violence. We want peaceful ways to do it. What can we do to begin a change and to do something positive here?
Well, speaking to your violence point, what happens when you force someone to do something? They resent it. So you actually, your idea gains less steam the more you force it on people. And so it doesn't, from a logical sense, it doesn't make any sense there. But really, what can we do? The first and most important thing that people can do is start telling your story. If you've dealt with the IRS, if you've been victimized by the IRS, if the IRS has violated your rights, the most important thing you can do is tell your story. We have a way for people to tell their story on taxrevolution.us. If you go to the website, you can contact us. We're doing some different tools to make sure that people's stories get out there. But right now, what you have within the IRS is the American people in polls generally don't care for the agency. I mean, most people would rather, step on a cockroach, be a cockroach or something like that than actually support the IRS. And more people support Kanye West than the IRS, which is when they're really getting bad as an agency. But really, what it comes down to is most people do not know that the IRS goes above and beyond revenue collection. Nobody talks about it. There's a black hole on information on exactly who is abused by the IRS, when they're abused by the IRS, what the IRS did to them. It's a complete black hole. It's like one of those, you've heard the classic phrase, religion and politics, the two things you don't talk about in polite company. It's like that's narrowed to the IRS, the thing you don't talk about in any company at all. And as long as there's a blackout, think to the police accountability movement. Okay, support it, don't support it, whatever. Think to the police accountability movement. If we had not seen the videos of the police agents beating people, of them firing upon unarmed civilians, right? Yeah. If we had never heard the stories of the mothers who lost sons to police violence, if we never heard any of that maymovement would not have gone anywhere. No one would be involved. There'd be a couple of different people here and there who were concerned about it, but they'd be wonks in an ivory tower in a college somewhere. But really what it comes down to is we need people to start sharing their stories. Start talking about what the IRS did to you. Start talking about your experiences with that agency. Start talking about your friends' experiences with that agency. Start talking about where the IRS has violated your rights and really infringed on your life. And once people start doing that, you start to get an idea of exactly how bad the IRS is and exactly how unaccountable that agency is. And then you start fostering the environment for real change. That's the number one thing people can do is start telling your stories. Number two is start going to these nonprofits that you know and start talking to them about the upcoming rule. Because you want to think about how you can make a change in politics. We were talking about this a little bit on air. That if you want to make a change in politics, you don't want to wake everybody up. You don't want to get everybody involved in your political movement, even though we hear it all the time.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that. I know you talk about this a lot, and I have to agree with you so much. You make a good point, because most often people say, well, we got to get everybody involved. Let's get everybody on board. Why wouldn't we try to get everybody on board?
Because not everybody's going to care. Exactly what percentage of the population actually fought in the American Revolution? 3%. That's why people call themselves 3%ers. What percentage of people actually matter on election day? It's usually about 3.5%, roughly. The way the numbers break down is in every jurisdiction, you have 100% population. Out of the 100% population, 70% of them are actually eligible to vote. So you take out the minors, you take out the illegal aliens, things like that. 40% actually register to vote, 20% actually vote on election day. Of those 20%, 7% usually vote Democrat, 7% vote party line Republican. Those people aren't really counted that much by politicians because they know they'll get their vote anyway. That leaves 6%. 3% plus 1 is what you need to flip that 6%. And every politician who's run for any office generally knows this formula. So really what it comes down to is if you are trying to change McDonald's, let's say you're trying to make them get a better burger, make them give you better service. You're not going to go to people who don't shop at McDonald's. You're not going to go to people who don't care about McDonald's. You
wouldn't go to the vegetarian clubs or the vegan clubs. Not a lot of people there.
Not a lot of people there go to McDonald's. Exactly. And you might, and you'd have better success going to people who shop at McDonald's because they actually do care a little bit about the service they're given. But you'll have the best success going to the shareholders in McDonald's because they have invested and they know the impact that their investment will have on their own lives. Well, most people have not invested in this government. Most people have not. If they pay taxes, yeah, but they haven't emotionally invested. They don't understand that if they get involved, things change. They don't really care about the impacts of the government. So why would you talk to those people? Why would you waste your time? If you're a salesman, it would be ridiculous for you to try to sell business copiers at an apartment complex. So why are you trying to wake everybody up? It doesn't make any sense. So the second thing you can do if you want this agency to be held accountable, and if you want to no longer the second thing you can do is start going to these nonprofit organizations. Start going to these organizations that are involved in politics and start talking to them about holding the IRS accountable. Because those are the shareholders. Those are the people who are actually involved. Those people who are actually engaged, which is on one hand, the IRS rule is awful. This muzzling rule is awful. But on the other hand, it allows us to build a First Amendment alliance and show all of these politically active organizations that this agency is unafraid, essentially, to try and limit your rights. And you need to hold that agency accountable. It's basically a gift. You know, we talk about fights that actually enrage your enemies more and get your enemies rallied around instead of actually help you. Well, this is a fight the IRS picked. And so the second thing is go to all nonprofits and convince them we need to hold this agency accountable. Join the First Amendment Alliance. Get involved in the First Amendment Alliance. October 1st is that deadline. Again, the website is taxrevolution.us. And the third thing is if you see what we're doing and you support what TRI is doing, then donate, volunteer, get involved, send our messages and our information out to your friends. You're involved in alternative media or you're involved in the media, get that word out. I mean, really, we are about 15 or 20 people on staff. And we are the only national organization that in our mission statement is dedicated to keeping this agency transparent or making it transparent and accountable. And
keeping the IRS transparent and accountable. That sounds like a monumental feat. And the next one after that is to cure all diseases and restore world peace and get a
and land on Jupiter. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
But if you never try, you never know what'll come out of it. And
that's true.
This is, in my opinion, and I talked about scams earlier, I talked about how they use fear, that this is one of the main agencies people fear if they've done nothing wrong.
Yep, exactly. We're seeing the IRS has resisted a lot of that, but there could be some hope. We see change happening occasionally with government, and so we know we can make progress. Matter of fact, you might have seen this, Dan. Did you see a couple of weeks ago? They fired the head of the TSA. All those lines that they had, the head of the TSA actually was fired. But then to rub it in, they made him fly home. Really?
That's good.
So I don't know if that is going to make any difference, but what you're doing at TRI, the Tax Revolution Institute, is amazing. Matter of fact, those of you joining us, I would encourage you to take a look at it. I've just discovered these guys a little while ago when Dan and his people got in touch with us here at Freedom Fest TV to talk about and to come on board. And so I thought, okay, let me check them out. Being the journalist that I am, I wanted to look at it and read about it. And I've been over there and really find it impressive. You got some good folks on your staff. Matter of fact, I want to get to know some of them from here in Florida, where we are, as well as from my home state of Michigan. I noticed some people there, and I want to get a chance to talk a little bit more about what you're doing at the TRI. And for those of you watching, this is an organization you want to get to know. find out what they're doing. They've been around for just a short time, and yet, even in that short time, they have already catapulted up to significant prominence. And we can pretty much guess the folks at the IRS, who I'm sure will be watching this. Hello there. Hope you're doing well. Right now, we know they're joining us, and we'll be watching what we do. And again, I like the way that you're approaching it, what you're saying, and what you're doing. You're doing it in a methodical, peaceful way, and making some change possible that way. Right?
And there's a couple of points there of what hasn't worked and why are we going about it some of the ways we're going about it. One of the biggest problems with holding the IRS accountable or engaging in our long-term goal, the Atlas Network just wrote an article about us. Our long-term goal is replacing the tax code. Our long-term goal is, because the tax code is a convoluted mess, the code itself is like 6,500 pages, and then because you can't actually rely on the code, you have to rely on all the revenue rulings. You're looking at about 70,000 pages worth of stuff you have to read.
Casual light reading.
Just stick it in your bathroom and read whenever you hit the job.
Sure, but ignorance of the law is no excuse. Yeah, right.
When the judges are ignorant of the law, I would say ignorance of the law happens to be an excuse. But really,
yeah, good point.
What it comes down to is most efforts at either tax reform or holding the IRS accountable were partisan. Plain and simple, they were partisan. And that ignores 50% of the country that's on the other side of the spectrum. Or 40% of the country on the other side of the spectrum, and 10% of the country that's on a different part of the spectrum. And when you create partisan organizations, when you get involved in partisanship, when you advance a partisan agenda, you instantly create enemies out of the other side, even if they would agree with your message, because you have labeled yourselves as partisan, because you are partisan. Right. And one of the things we've done very clearly is we're bringing the left, we're bringing the right together to not only have a conversation about tax reform, but to work together to make this agency accountable. And we have the Coffee Party, which is like the opposite of the Tea Party. We have one of their board members on our board.
Tell us about the Coffee Party.
Well, the Coffee Party is a group that's concerned about money and politics. And they formed as kind of the civil, they call themselves more or less the civil alternative to the Tea Party. But they're more of a liberal group. They consider themselves more liberal. And they have as much of an interest as conservatives in keeping this agency accountable. In fact, all Americans really have at least some interest in keeping the IRS accountable. And so the first thing you need to do, if you are an organization that wants to make real change, you have to be nonpartisan. Period. End of story. You are a partisan organization. Well, guess what? They turned the targeting scandal in 2010, 11, 12, and 13 into a partisan issue. And now, to this day, no real legislative change has been passed to prevent the IRS from doing what it's been doing. Very few people involved in that have been held accountable. Why? Because they made it partisan. So that's number one. We are a nonpartisan organization. We will stay that way. Number two is most people cannot take on the IRS by themselves. That is something that we understand, that there really is a legitimacy to the fear that they would be gone after by the IRS. And so what we've done is we've created a well-resourced organization that is very public and that is not afraid to fight for and defend victims of IRS abuse. And in creating that organization, we're much more powerful together than we are separately. So if people fear retribution, they can come under our wing. They can come to us. They can go to TRI, and then TRI can advance the ball in their court. We might put out documentaries. We might put out their story in a news broadcast. We might bring them to events like Freedom Fest. We might help them get their story out and help protect them from an agency that doesn't seem to mind, in some cases, retribution. That really people can come under our wing, people can come into TRI, and we all can work together, because the IRS is much less likely to go after an organization or the people with an organization that's been in the public spotlight, that is very clear about holding the IRS accountable. Because if they did that, can you imagine the political fallout? The political fallout would be pretty awful. Mm-hmm. So another thing that is really key about this is if people have been abused by the IRS, if people in the future are abused by the IRS or an IRS agent or someone involved with that agency, that we can advocate for them, we can come to court for them, we can go to bat for them, and we can enact permanent reforms to keep the IRS from doing it again.
Yeah, very good point. One of the things we talk about in Silicon Valley a lot, and given the work I do with technology, and also there's a Japanese saying, none of us is as smart as all of us. And I think we could also say none of us is as strong as all of us. And what you're doing at TRI gives a stronger presence, a stronger way to band together to do what's right and to make sure that our rights are defended, that we use the constitutional rights that are available, excuse me, and go forward with that. Well, now we're starting to run out of time here, but before we get away, one of the things I wanted to ask you, we haven't touched on yet, but I'd be very interested in your comments on, there are many people that say, you know, what we need to do is to replace the IRS and all of the volumes of rules and tax law that they have with what's called a fair tax or a flat tax. I'd be interested in just kind of an overview of your comments on those two options, either one of them, and what you think about them, given your experience with taxes and what you've done so far, Dan.
Sure. So it's a very good question. And we actually went to, I'll call it a Billionaire Boys Club conference out in DC. It was basically the special interests from Goldman Sachs and Wall Street came together with tax professionals and held themselves a conference. And at that conference, they had the chief of staff of the Joint Committee on Taxation speaking. And we stood up and we asked the chief of staff of the Joint Committee on Taxation. Most people don't know, by the way, the Joint Committee on Taxation is responsible for America's tax law. They were formed to make it simpler.
Oh, they're doing a dandy job.
They're doing a very, very, very impressive job. And
whoa, next thing we know, they're going to take on world cancer and AIDS, and right?
And then we'll all have cancer within a couple of weeks. But really, the Joint Committee on Taxation is the committee to watch. They are the committee that is responsible for your tax troubles. They are the committee that is responsible for you not being able to understand tax law. They're the committee that's responsible for a tax law that favors all of these loopholes for any special interest that has enough lobbyists in Washington. And we asked the chief of staff of the JCT, so why have the American people not latched on to any of the tax plans? Why have they not supported? You're talking to congressmen all the time. You're talking to people who are going to their districts and they're hearing from their constituents. Why have the American people not really gotten behind any of the tax plans? And his answer, after he got done stuttering, was, "I'm just an economist. I don't really da 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 da." And really, when you think about it, why have the American people not gotten behind the tax plans? We're not, as TRI. We're starting with holding the IRS accountable because we believe that's something that every American can get behind, and we believe that's a necessary prerequisite to having any type of tax reform, is holding the agency that's going to enforce whatever the new tax reform is accountable to whatever you put in. Because if you change the entire tax code and this agency decides not to follow it, well, what have you done? You've kind of wasted your time. So really, that's a prerequisite. But once that prerequisite is out of the way, although we're not criticizing any of the existing tax reform plans, what we are doing is we're saying they need a couple things. That this is why the American people are not latching on to tax reform, even though they say it's the number one thing on their mind. They want this done. They absolutely want this done. And tax reform means nothing, by the way, which is why we're called the Tax Revolution Institute and not the Tax Reform Institute.
I like that, revolution versus reform. Reform is kind of like, yes, nice. Okay, it's all pretty and nice there with a little bow on top. Revolution is, get out of here, we're doing
Revolution
it right.
is, we're doing it right.
Very peacefully, of course.
Very peacefully, and I talk about this in my presentations. Look, we have things called martyrs for a reason. They give up their life for their reputation. People's reputation is way more important than their life. It's not only wrong to do it violently, it's illogical. It doesn't make any sense. But nonetheless.
Absolutely. Yeah. What was it Nietzsche said? You know, that which does not kill me makes me stronger, which is good, except, hey, time sure flies when you're dead. You know, being a martyr, not a good thing.
Right. And so really what it comes down to is, number one, that tax reform has not caught the attention, or they have not gotten behind any particular tax plan because they're partisan. The flat tax was introduced in 1987 by Alvin Rabushka. Why is it not going anywhere? Because only Republicans support it. Only in Republican circles do they talk about it. The fair tax, also not going anywhere. That was introduced, I believe it was in 1993, was the first bill. That's also not going anywhere. I think only 3 Democrats have ever voted for it. And on the other side of the spectrum, the more progressive taxation, Republicans aren't voting for it. So the minute one side pulls up their tax reform plan, the other side throws spitballs at it. Congressman Dave Camp worked on tax reform plan for years. And there was an email that came from Politico not too long ago that basically said the House doesn't care and they're starting all over again. They're just going to throw away everything from the plan. They're going to start all over again. So the number one reason the American people have not gotten behind a tax reform plan is partisan. Number 2. There is no transition plan in place. Wow. The economy is very easy to shock. When Yahoo News' Twitter account got hacked, the stock market went down by like 600 points when they said the president's been shot or something like that on the Yahoo News Twitter account. That's how easy it is to shock the economy. You replace the entire tax code. You replace the entire tax system. And that's a shock the economy has never felt before. So what you need to do is you need to create a transition plan that protects the most vulnerable in your new tax reform as this new tax reform transitions in, as this new plan actually transitions in. So that's number 2. You need a transition plan or you're just irresponsible, honestly. You're irresponsible, you're advancing a plan that's really not going to go anywhere because you haven't thought about people who are going to be hurt by your plan on the way going through it.
Transition makes a lot of sense. If you're going to move from anything to something better, you do need a transition. Often think like the tax system. Imagine you have someone who is morbidly obese, 500 some pounds. That person needs medical attention. So you bring in the right medical doctors and the medical team. You give them reasonable diet, reasonable exercise, and the other components that health professionals tell us to do. Don't expect a drop down immediately to the right way, but after a while they can do it. And it should work well after a time, but it does take time for that. So yeah, I have to agree with you there.
Absolutely. And so the next thing, transition plan, and I actually have a FedEx guy at my door, so I have to get there real quick. But let me finish out with this. The third thing is because it's an actual plan, and this is important to understand. When you create a plan with like 10 parts, in that plan, if one person attacks one of those 10 parts, none of your other parts can go through because you put them all together in a plan. So all someone has to do is knock out one of the legs of your tax plan, and then it's over. The fair tax, the prebates gets knocked out, the flat tax, the regressiveness gets knocked out. It's very, very clear that that's easy to do with the tax plan. So if you're going to create real tax reform, you have to have several parts that can operate on their own. And that's really, so we don't necessarily criticize any of those plans, and we don't support them. We are looking at, we're starting from ground zero. We're looking at the economics, and we're looking at how you can protect and how you can actually advance the interests of the American people with these tax proposals. So really, that's a little bit further down the road. We start with keeping the IRS accountable, but a little bit further down the road. But that is, I would say, our view on tax plans and on what you really need to have in this country, which is you really need to have a real tax revolution, and really very few politicians understand that. I don't expect.
Well, our guest has been Dan Johnson. He is with the Tax Revolution Institute. He is a very wise person with a lot of good things going on. You're joining us here on Freedom Fest TV, where we talk about lots of freedom ideas, and we're looking forward to having you join us at Freedom Fest coming up this July, the world's largest gathering of free minds and really an intellectual feast to learn about a variety of different topics. And Dan, while you're still here on board, Gina's going to tell us a little bit about what's coming up and how people can get involved with that. Gina Carr,
I've got to go, but thank you so much for having me. Right. Yes, I got to go say hello to him. Taxrevolution.us.
Sounds good. We'll keep your line open, keep your channel open there. And Gina, tell us a little bit about Freedom Fest, what it is, and well, anything else that you've got on your mind.
Oh, just some exciting announcements that have just been made. Paula Dean is going to be there with us this year. That's big news. She's going to be talking about some of the controversies that she's experienced over the last few years. And certainly she's learning to be more open-minded. And Freedom Fest is all about being open-minded and listening to other points of view and learning from each other. I just noticed that Jenny Beth Martin, co-founder of Tea Party Patriots, has been added to the roster. She's been a favorite for several years at Freedom Fest. The Libertarian Party presidential candidate Gary Johnson's going to be there. So we're excited about that. And the people who were hot candidates for Libertarian Party presidential nominee, and that was John McAfee and Austin Peterson. They'll be there also. Just so many, I could talk for hours about the exciting things that are going on at Freedom Fest. We want you to join us. It's July 13th through the 16th in Las Vegas at Planet Hollywood, and you can get $100 off your registration if you'll use code FFTV, all caps, at freedomfest.com, or just go to the website and there's a phone number right at the top. Call there and the registration folks will help you out and get you all registered.
Very good. Well, thank you, Gina. And so we thank you for joining us here. We're looking at the issue of taxes, and Dan and his organization, the Tax Revolution Institute, making some difference. And they're making a profound stand that on an issue that affects all of us that live within the United States or who are American citizens worldwide, who get the honor and the privilege of being one of the only 2 countries in the world to have to pay taxes wherever you earn it. But that's a whole nother story. Dan, any final closing words? How's that for redundancy? Final closing words that you might have before we let you scurry about to whatever you're going to do, messing IRS people.
Well, you know, you've been a public speaker for a while, so you know how really serious you have to be about this is where you end. This is how much time you
like
have.
the grown-ups do it, huh?
So speaking of grown-ups, here's really what it comes down to: is we need to have an adult conversation in this country about tax reform. A seriously adult conversation, and a conversation that takes into account all sides of the issue, a conversation that takes into account people from the left and people from the right and people from the middle and people from upside down and right side up. And we're not having that in this presidential race right now. These candidates are not putting forth realistic proposals. They're putting forth proposals that get a lot of applause from the audience, but really applause does not affect when you sit down in front of a 135-page tax reform, even though you made less than $40,000 that year. Applause doesn't change that. Really what changes that is real policy change. Really what changes that is alleviating the burden of a tax code that isn't simple, that isn't transparent, and it represents money in politics. That represents all the special interests getting every loophole they want in the book. And in order to do that, we need to start by holding the IRS accountable. We need to start by opening up this area that no one talks about, that no one discusses. That is the IRS's abuses. And we need to start saying, we will stand together and we will say no. Look, I don't care if you're for or against it, but the very first time in this country that we stopped this country from going to war was in 2013, going to war in Syria on behalf of Al-Qaeda. That was the first time in American history that the people opposed a war their Congress supported and Congress backed off. See, we can, because of the power of the internet, the power of technology, whatever you want to call it, we can, as a country, even with a small amount of people, we can get together and we can hold our government accountable. We can hold it transparent. And one of the best places to hit right now, and then one of the best places to start, is the IRS, is the revenue collecting arm of that government. Let's open up the books on the IRS, so to speak. Let's make sure that they're transparent. Let's make sure that they're accountable, and let's do that together. Let's really create the platform for a tax revolution in this country. I'm not the tax revolution. I'm 23 years old. As of yesterday.
Happy birthday.
I'm not the tax. Thank you. I am not the tax revolution. We're the Tax Revolution Institute. It's the ideas, the platform for the tax revolution. You are the tax revolution. The American taxpayer is where the tax revolution starts. You guys are the revolution. We just provide the tools. We just provide the inspiration. We just provide a shield for those those of you to start it, but we need a tax revolution in this country. And to be fair, we need it now. And we can get it if we as a country come together, left, right, for a non-partisan tax revolution. That's what we're pushing for, taxrevolution.us. Thank you very much for having
Dan,
me
thank you, sir. We appreciate you being here, and we really appreciate what you are doing, you and your team at the Tax Revolution Institute, and those that are joining us from there, either live or via recording. We appreciate you, and on behalf of the team at Freedom Fest, we appreciate all that's being here. Gina Carr, our producer on this, and don't forget, Freedom Fest is coming up. Want to get together with a bunch of free market, free-minded liberty lovers, talk about all kinds of wacky, wild things like freedom and liberty. This is the place to do it. If you can be there, you definitely want to make your plans now for Freedom Fest coming up in July. Just go to freedomfest.com. You'll see all the details there. And don't forget that code. You can get $100 off the registration if you use FFTV. That's as in Foxtrot, Tango, Victor. Be sure and put those in, get that right, and you will get that discount. On behalf of Freedom Fest, the entire team and Freedom Fest TV, thank you for joining us. I'm Terry Brock, and we look forward to seeing you again a little bit later.